all that we accomplish is for the pursuit of truth, for the greater glory of you, and for the service of humanity. We ask these in your name. Amen.
Thank you very much. Let me welcome the team from the Ministry, the Financial Secretary, Mrs. Jarrett from the Ministry of Finance, and for the other persons online from departments and agencies. Let me wish you all a happy new year, productive new year, and a blessed new year for this 2022, and to the members of the PAAC and those online, and to our supporting staff at the Parliament. A blessed new year to all of you. We're coming to the end we're in the last quarter of the financial year, as we have the second supplementary budget in front of us. We're hoping that 2022 is also a productive year for the PAAC, as last year, 2021, wasn't as productive as we wanted it to be. But the work continues, and we have to do the work that we have been elected as members of Parliament and members of this committee in ensuring that the PAAC operates efficiently and effectively. So let me welcome you. This is, again, we have a tight schedule because we have to complete this report this evening, at least, for it to be circulated for the sitting of the House tomorrow. Yes, the Minister of Finance has given us a tight schedule, which is one that we have to have a discussion on, because when we do meetings like this, it becomes very, very, very tight, not only for the staff, who also mans more than one committee, but also for the team also in the short notice one, and to have an effective committee meeting. But be that it is, we move along. So welcome again, everyone. In front of us we have item 5. We're here to discuss the review of the second supplementary estimate, which was tabled in the House yesterday for the financial year ending March 31st, 2021. As usual, we'll ask the Financial Secretary to make her opening remarks. Do we have the PIOJ? Because normally they're not online, so you'll be carrying the heavy lifting for the government. Okay. So I'll invite the Financial Secretary to make her opening remarks.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. So as the PAAC is aware, the first supplementary estimates 2021-22 was approved in October and indicated an expenditure of $867.3 billion. This was comprised of above-the-line non-debt recurrent expenditure of $514.6 billion, of which $246.6 billion was allocated for compensation and $267.9 for recurring programs. Capital accounted for $54.2 billion, public debt servicing for $280.1 billion, and below-the-line expenditure of $18.4 billion. The first supplementary estimates also included some contingency under the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. We had $10.3 billion for the payment of increased salaries to central government public sector workers for the current fiscal year, and $5 billion for additional social spending under the Serve Jamaica program. The second supplementary, which has been tabled, amounts to $893 billion, which is $25.8 billion, or 3% above where the first supplementary estimates put the budget. And this second supplementary places the budget at, broken out as compensation of employees, $245.1 billion, recurrent programs, above the line recurrent programs at 276 billion, capital at 54.2, recurrent programs at 19.99 billion, and public debt service at 297.7 billion. The second supplementary reflects the transfer of resources from the Ministry of Finance and Public Service contingency to the ministries, departments, and agencies responsible for executing the care component of the SERVE program and for payment of the 4% salary increase offered to the public sector workers for this fiscal year. In regards to the government's 4% wage settlement, the second supplementary estimates provides for a total of 11.29 billion in expenditure related to the government's 21-22 wage offer, which is comprised of a 4% increase in wages and salaries and a special one-off payment of $40,000 to employees who are in receipt of the 4% increase in wages and salaries and whose basic pay is $1.5 million or less per annum for the period April 1, 2021 through March 31, 2022. While some bargaining groups are still in negotiations with the government regarding the offer, payment of arrears and new rates for the period were facilitated in the December payroll for workers whose bargaining units accepted the offer. In addition, subvention support is proposed to assist some entities, namely the UWI, UTEC, UHWI, and JUTC. The $5 billion allocated during the first supplementary estimate under the MOFPS for the care component of the Jamaica SERVE program is for additional social support and is being transferred in the second supplementary estimates to the implementing agencies, which are the Office of the Prime Minister, $189 million for allocation to members of Parliament for the provision of care food packages through the Constituency Development Fund, Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, $170 million to support the indoor and outdoor poor relief assistance program, and that's $100 million, and $70 million for the allocation to parish councillors for the provision of care food packages, just to know that these would have already been transferred. To the Ministry of Finance and Public Service, $1.88 billion to the COVID-19 response activity, and this is to provide an additional set cash grant payment to former employees on the PAAC system who remain unemployed at September 2021, and to finance the workers' grant for employees on the PAAC system who earn less than or equal to $15,000 per week or $780,000 per year, as well as self-employed persons whose statutory income is less than or equal to $15,000 per week or $780,000 per year. The Ministry of Labor and Social Security is also a recipient. A total of $2.76 billion is to provide cash grants of $10,000 to 130,000 PATH households, 57,000 NIS pensioners, and 5,000 social pensioners. $100 million additional support to the public assistance program, $741 million to facilitate the care food program under an arrangement between the government and the non-governmental organizations. In addition to the sums allocated for wages and salaries and increased social spending, other expenditures have been accommodated in the second supplementary estimates to address critical areas of operations. These include $1 billion to the Ministry of Health to address compensation in the Southern Regional Health Authority, that's $667 million, and the Western Regional Health Authority, $333 million. $978 million to the Ministry of National Security and the Police Department, and this includes $107 million for land acquisition for the related construction of the St. Catherine Police Divisional Headquarters. $850 million to the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation to enable expenditure of $1.3 billion under the Special Employment Christmas Work Program executed in December 2021. $1.7 billion to fully capture insurance premium in respect of the catastrophe bond, and $396 million to the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development for additional central government support to the National Solid Waste Management Authority for public cleansing and garbage disposal. On a capital expenditure, the total overall capital expenditure has remained at $54.2 billion. Approximately $2.4 billion has been reallocated between projects based on performance to date and projected sums that will be utilized during the remaining weeks of 2021-22. Of this, $1.9 billion has been allocated to the South Coast Highway Improvement Program and $131 million to the Energy Management and Efficiency Program under the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology. For public debt, the public debt expenditure outlined in fiscal year 2021-22 second supplementary estimates reflects a projected increase of 6.3% to $297.7 billion, comprising external debt service of $171.6 billion and domestic debt costs of $126.1 billion. The increase is mainly attributable to costs associated with the execution of a liability management exercise on the external debt portfolio, the appreciation of the Jamaica dollar to the US dollar over the period, and the increased interest rates and settlement of a guaranteed National Water Commission credit facility. The below-the-line expenditure has increased by approximately $1.6 billion, reflecting a loan to the Central Wastewater Treatment Company from the central government, which was used to effect settlement of a National Commercial Bank Capital Markets Limited secured notes. This was a guaranteed note that matured in October 2021. The financing of the second supplementary estimates will be derived from the following sources: tax revenue of $4.1 billion, primarily from international trade taxes, which have overperformed to date. Non-tax revenue of $4.6 billion, reflecting additional transfers from public entities. Bauxite levy receipts of $2 billion, representing the surplus relative to the first supplementary estimates. And grant inflows of $0.6 billion, mainly reflecting the US $5 million contribution from US aid in support of the government's catastrophe bond issuance. Loan receipts of $5.3 billion, derived from an opportunistic $5.8 billion domestic issuance in December 2021, and drawdown of $9.2 billion from existing cash reserves. We have a summary of the expenditure as well as the central government summary table attached to the report.
Thank you. Madam FS. All right. I'm not sure which of the members are online, but I will open the floor for questions from members. Member Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the wage settlement on page 2 and the bargaining groups where they accepted the offer and monies have been allocated to that. What of those that did not accept? Is there an allocation for them as well, or do we consider that after there is a resolution? How is it treated?
Okay, so we have made provision for payment of the groups that have not yet accepted. It is in fact included and has been allocated under the relevant ministries.
Is that figure what you are proposing?
It is what we are proposing.
Okay, and then if it is that figure is higher, then we come back here?
Well, I don't know if we would be able to come back here, but yes, it would require Parliament, for this fiscal year that is, it would require adjustment to the supplementary estimates.
The debt stock, where are we now in? I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a suspension of the agreement with the IMF itself in the debt reduction, so that the government would have been able to take care of some of the expenditures to deal with dealing with the COVID-19. Where are we now with our debt stock? Or what is the percentage to GDP now?
Okay, so the debt stock is only calculated at the end of the fiscal year, Chair. So we are, what we have is a projection. I believe we are expecting to come in at approximately 97%.
97%?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's an increase from...
A decrease.
That's an increase?
A decrease from
A
where
decrease?
from where we went last year because of the COVID and the no growth.
We ended last year at what?
It was 101. I think it was about 101.
Okay. And I mean, that is good news.
Yes.
Yeah. What are some of the items that helped us to reduce our debt stock to this percentage?
Okay, so one of the things would be the fact that we are expecting growth for this year, that the growth has returned. We have also been so far paying down. So we had the debt stock, the overall debt stock includes the public bodies. We have had two elements, the National Water Commission and the CWTC, which has actually been totally paid out by us. We have limited our borrowing. We have been utilizing what cash reserves we have to reduce, to pay the below the line expenditures. So we are actually reducing the debt and not bringing in as much as we may have done in a previous period.
The issue with
Can you give me 1 second, please?
Sure.
All right, so the debt stock last year was 110.
The debt?
Stock for last year was 110.
110.
I said 101.
It was 110.
Yeah.
Not 101, but 110.
110.
And we are expected to close out the year at 97.
Yes.
Yes. As you touched on the NWC, and it just from my own knowledge, this is a debt that the NWC, a loan that the NWC itself took, that central government is now paying out. Is it a matter that the NWC itself, did the government of Jamaica guarantee this loan?
Yes, it was a guaranteed debt.
And is it that NWC was not able to service the debt, hence why we're paying it out, meaning from central government?
Okay, so they would have had to borrow to pay it out.
They would have what?
They would have had to have borrowed in order to make the repayment. They were in fact looking to do that, but we got to a point where it was in the nation's interest.
What was the amount of that debt?
To pay it out. It was approximately, well, the final piece was approximately $7.9 billion in Jamaican.
JA dollars.
Right.
7.9.
It was a US dollar, but
Sorry?
it works out to approximately 7.9 billion.
Okay. So US dollar debt.
Yes.
And is there any other debt of that kind that the NWC is holding? Or are there other entities within the government that have debt of this kind that they are unable to service just like this?
All right, so I'm not aware of any debt that is not being serviced. This was a maturity that became due. So it would have been serviced all along, and they did intend to pay it over by borrowing.
Yeah.
So we are managing the overall debt stock, and it was felt that it was in our interest to just take out the loan, to just take out the debt, sorry.
All right. Any other questions from?
I was saying yes, but then I'm not sure if there's anybody online who wants to ask. You're not
gotten any indication from anybody else online.
I just wanted to go to the set cash grant payments. I know in 2020 when it was done, disbursed, a lot of people were not able to collect through the MoneyGrams and the different other entities. I'm wondering how is that collection now for this September payout that was mentioned? Are you aware of where we are?
All right, so collections have been taking place. The issues with the remittance agencies have, for the most part, been resolved. I mean, in the earlier period, I think they had run into issues with IDs, persons who weren't able to go, and we did indicate that a third party could collect with particular conditions. So people have been able to collect for a specific set cash. We had made all the payments up to the period, excepting the one September payment, which was new under the first supplementary estimates, and that payment has now been released. Yeah, it's on the way.
Chairman?
Yes, member.
Good morning, fellow members and participants. I just want to go back to page 3 of the statement regarding the public debt. I just indicate that the overall debt stock projected to reduce to 97 from the 110 last year. That there is an increase in the public debt in the supplementary.
Okay, so the increase is in the debt service. So the interest has increased, but we also have an increase in amortization. The amortization is... Sorry?
Didn't hear you, member.
No, my system seemed to give it. Are you hearing me now, Chairman?
We are hearing you clearly.
Okay. I was just referring to page 3 of the FS report, where it refers to the public debt increased by approximately 6-point-something% of 297.7. So I'm curious to know what is responsible for that increase in the debt, both external and foreign debt. Is it exchange rate on the foreign debt?
Okay, it's not an increase in the debt, it's an increase in the debt service. So both the interest and the amortization has increased primarily as a result of exchange rate, or rather currency depreciation. We also had interest rates increasing, and certainly for the amortization and to some extent the interest, the debts that we have taken out, the NWC payment and the NWC payment would have added to the amortization. And all of that actually translates
those increased payments
into increased payments, but into a reduction, into helping to reduce the debt stock.
Okay, Chair.
Are you through, member?
Yes, I'm through for now.
In the public bodies, the Urban Development Corporation increase of 180 million re-UDC judgment awards. Can any details be given on which judgment these are, or what are the issues?
Sorry, I'm not able to speak on which judgment it was, but it was something I went to the court, and the court awarded UDC. I think it was payments due from the Ministry of Health.
Due from, so meaning Ministry of Health, another agency paying the UDC, or the UDC paying out monies?
Another agency paying the UDC.
Okay. A court matter?
Yes.
The 150 million to the JUTC.
Okay, it's an increase in the subvention that we pay. It will likely be used to assist with the salary payments.
And what would that bring the subvention to now for the JUTC?
1 second. Okay, 5.7 billion.
Sorry?
5.77 billion.
5.7.
And that includes Montego Bay Metro as well.
So the subvention, but I find it a little bit strange that the JUTC would be rolling out half the amount of buses that they budgeted at the beginning of the year, and we would be increasing the subvention, because I would imagine that their operational costs would be less compared to what they start out the financial year with, budgeting. So
okay.
what would attribute an additional 150 million and still being subsidized of $5.7 billion of taxpayers' money when you're rolling out half the stock?
Okay, so to the best of my knowledge, sir, the increase in the subvention for JUTC is primarily related to their salary payments, but the Montego Bay Metro has also been brought on in terms of providing subvention.
I understand that. But, Madam FS, as I've asked in the past, I mean, it would be to the interest of the government itself and the Ministry of Finance that if it is that the operations of the JUTC has really been cut in half, you're still paying the same amount of staff itself that you have there, but half the rollout of bus, that there's something economically wrong with the operations there. And I've asked the question already, is it that the Ministry of Finance will be, with the Ministry of Transport, will be taking an overall look at the operations of the JUTC, because we're still spending this, giving the same amount or more, because I expect that the losses of the JUTC is going to be even twice what it was in the last financial year. With less revenue from passengers, less bus rollout, but we're still subsidizing at the same amount from taxpayers. Is there going to be a serious look taken at the JUTC, or is it that we're going to allow it to continue consuming the same amount of money, subvention, but giving us less?
All right, sir. I believe the government is, in fact, looking at how to address the issues of the Jamaica Urban Transit Port Center Corporation.
Is that just a holding statement or one that is actually being done? Because I've been hearing this every time that we come to a meeting like this.
No, it is being looked at, but the Ministry of Transport would be better able to respond.
Chairman, if I may, Chairman.
Go ahead, member.
Interesting that you asked that question, because I had it down to ask the FS if they are satisfied in operation of the JUTC for the same reason. I hope that before we come here with this additional allocation, would have been under scrutiny of the Ministry of Finance already. Because it is clear to everybody that the level of service has deteriorated. And I would believe that the ministry would have been interactive with the JUTC about its performance. So I think it is impatient for detailed assessment and response by the Ministry of Finance. The fact is, at the end of the day, the Ministry of Finance is paying these monies on behalf of the country.
Well, the minister himself says that there would be about 2 financial years ago, said that there would be an effort through his ministry of ensuring the tight operation of government agencies and departments. I mean, you know, the road fund was subsumed and other agencies have been looked at. And I'm wondering, why is it that it is taking so long for us to look at the JUTC? It is consuming. The loss in the last financial year, if you look at the subvention plus the losses, is about $10 billion, Madam FS. It is urgent that the operation of the JUTC, because otherwise what you're going to end up having is a government asset or asset that is owned by the people of Jamaica that is worth nothing. It is already there. And we keep on throwing monies at an asset that is non-performing at this point in time. So, you know, be it that we keep getting a holding statement, I'm hoping that from this meeting we understand the urgency from your office to the Ministry of Transport that of the impending death of the JUTC, because that is basically what we're now overseeing. So I'm hoping that we can get some response on it.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to comment on what you said in relation to the JUTC and to say that there must be some strategy or some plan to reduce their debt and maybe to, you know, consolidate their efforts. Yeah. I think there's some alternative measures or plans to come to have some cost-saving strategies in place. I can't speak for them, but I would love to hear more about what their plans are in relation to even the types of buses that they use. Because now we're in 2022 and, you know, we can implement or integrate some new types of buses on the roads. We will never have enough buses to service the routes. So we have to now try and find some other way to be cost effective.
Yeah.
And maybe we can have a discussion with them.
Well, remember, what I am wanting to hear is a plan. Just as you mentioned, every year at the budget time we hear of some planning doing parts and doing in having electric buses. We have buses that are operating by LNG, but then we never yet expand the program or implement. And I understand the whole supply chain to do with parts and to order new buses. But when we delayed 3-4 years ago, the cost of those buses, I am sure, is twice the amount now in cost. And we have not put a new bus in the fleet in at least 4 or 5 years. So, you know, if it is that we're going to settle at 250 buses, as being that is now being rolled out, 260 maximum from the JUTC, then it can't be that you're paying the same amount of staff for 450 buses. right? Having an operation the size for 450 buses. I mean, there are consequences, but I want to hear what the plan is, because you can't keep on spending upwards of $10 billion a year in the JUTC and we don't have a plan.
And that's a discussion I think we should have. And you mentioned paying staff and having reduced buses, but it is really a discussion we should have as a government. Yeah. In terms of rationalization, which is a very touchy topic.
It is, but it's one that has to be had. All right. On page 19,000C, I think Mr. Hunter is online, or members from the National Works Agency. 1.926 billion for the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project.
Come on.
Yes.
Just before you move on to NWA, it was made a while ago about a court matter.
The UDC?
The UDC.
Yes.
And it struck me. And the amount again is it's $150 million?
185.38.
185, yes. That's a substantial amount of payment as a result of a court decision. My question to the FS. This obviously is a dispute between the parties why it went to court. Government agency. If I'm correct, that is two government agencies. I'm saying that we have no internal mechanism for resolving claim between government agencies. When matters go to court is when it's contentious, be resolved between the party. Is it that it got to that point that of the government entities could mediate and have a settlement before dragging this thing to the court?
All right, so I can't speak to that. The parent ministry and the Ministry of Health may be able to address it, but I am not able to.
But
well,
go ahead, member.
The parent ministry for UDC is at the meeting, is not so? Ministry of Job Creation.
Economic Growth and Job Creation.
Economic Growth and Job Creation.
Yes.
Could a representative, is the PS could shed some light on it? It's very alarming.
Good morning, member. Good morning, chair. Good morning, member. I'm Judith Rob Walters.
Yep.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Okay, right. In terms of the matter, we'll get information and forward it to the committee.
Why?
Did you get the details of the information?
You're saying you don't have that information either?
What I am aware is that there was some outstanding rental that was owed by Ministry of Health to the UDC. But in terms of additional information while it was taken to the court, I will provide that to you at a later date.
How soon is that, Ms. Walters, is likely to be? Can it be by next week or so?
You will be provided with it before next week because I'm in discussion with UDC right now.
Okay, thanks much.
You're welcome.
All right. Back to the 19,000C, Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. Capital expenditure, an additional amount of 1.926 billion for the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project. It says, can we get some explanation on this additional expenditure? Any member from, Economic Growth, National Works Agency? I saw Mr. Hunter online earlier.
All right, if I may, sir.
Sure.
Don't have full details, but the work has been proceeding
ahead of schedule?
efficiently, yes, fairly ahead of schedule and fairly efficiently. And therefore, to the extent that we saw that other areas were not utilizing the funds, we have reallocated them to that project, which is really performing.
Okay. I would love if we can get some more details on the breakdown of this 1.9. I'm not disputing the head of schedule, but also my understanding that there are some variances in some redesign of some of the areas also. So I would like to know how the breakdown of this 1.9 billion is allocated. And is it in 19,000 C3 Montego Bay waterfront project? Is that there's a reduction of 104 million? That is what slow pace of project now?
Information I have, Chair, is that the southern groins, work has not yet started on the southern groins. Okay. And while a consultant has been engaged to undertake geospatial testing, the work has not yet commenced. And so the savings from that were reallocated.
Okay.
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Hunter.
Okay. I understand you required, good morning, Chairman and others. I understand you wanted some clarification on the additional provision for the South Coast.
Yes,
yeah.
1.926 million.
The South Coast Highway Improvement Project actually has two components, as you know. The component being undertaken by NROC, which is the extension of the highway from Maypen through to Williamsfield. That's component one. And component two is the component being undertaken by the National Works Agency. And that is the improvement of the highway from Harborview to Port Antonio. You're familiar with that, that division of the project, sir, I take it?
Yes.
Okay. By formula, so although they are in two different components, we run them as one project. So this 1.9 will be distributed between the two components based on their need, because it's been done by the same contractor on similar contracts. This additional provision, Chairman, and I say this categorically, has nothing to do with any change in any design or any variation on the project. Okay. It's, as the narrative has said, we have been working a bit ahead of schedule, and I know that the normal, this is a new normal, because most people are, are associated or are familiar with us working behind schedule. Thankfully, we are working ahead of schedule this time. One of the main reasons for this is, that the rains this year has not been what it was last year, for example. So with good weather, we've been able to make good progress. A significant portion of this money will go towards the provision of the water supply elements. Again, let me repeat for the record, as you may recall, the original contract for this project was entirely for roadworks. The government subsequently took the decision to expand the scope to include fiber optic ducts for fiber optic cabling to allow for internet penetration. We also added water supply based on the prescription of the NWC, and so means as necessary. So again, we're talking about a more robust scope of work, and that all those provisions have been earmarked. This additional funding goes towards that.
Okay.
Am I clear?
Yes, you are clear, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
And at your convenience, we'll be happy to take you on a tour so you can see how the money is being spent.
Appreciate it, Mr. Hunter.
I want to take up, Chairman, I want to take up Mr. Hunter on that one, particularly the junction one too.
Yes, on both legs. As we're seeing some complaints of residents out in the porous area, the St. Toulis area, read dust. So I would take you up on that.
Member Jackson, I thought you were going to take me up on Brayton Parkway, but I'm happy. I'm happy that you're taking me up on something else.
I'm happy that you touched on it because I know that no provision is in this budget, so I took comfort that it will be accommodated with the scope of the funding that you have made mention of.
Well, you know, sir,
Mr. Hunter has been particularly mischievous, Chairman.
All right, members. Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Thank you very much, Mr. Hunter.
Okay. Thank you.
Members, are there any other clarification that is needed? And there is, Mr. Hunter, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
And this 850 million on 19,002 is to cover the end of year program?
Yes, it was. It was. And as you and I had discussed and agreed, this program, notwithstanding you know, how it has been categorized in the public pronouncement, this is a very necessary part of what we have to do to ensure safety on our roadways. You know, Chairman, it is one of the things that caused me great consternation. The mitigation works that we undertake in June, August, and December, which coincides with the hydraulic cycle and the hurricane season. I mean, we clean drains and do debushing in April, May, to take us into the start of the hurricane season, which starts on 1st of June. We then do another cycle towards the end of August into September, because statistically, the hurricane season peaks in October, late September, October. And then we close the cycle in December so that whatever would have accumulated, whatever silt and stuff would have accumulated in the drains, consequent on the peak of the hurricane season, September, October, we would have cleared those at the end of December. So although locally people refer to those as Christmas work or whatever, we see it as a necessary part of the preparation for the hurricane season, which is going to get worse. Hurricanes are not getting any better, or less intense. So I think the country should prepare itself for this type of activity to be continued and indeed to be increased if we want to build the kind of resilience that everyone is asking for. The final comment I'd make in that regard is also relates to the bushing. Again, Chairman, bushing is not a complex undertaking, but the positive impact of bushing a roadway in terms of the impact on safety cannot be overstated. And anyone who drives, you, Chairman, you have a rural constituency, and driving on these roads, especially at nights, if they're overgrown the benefit of having these roadways bushed is self-evident. So, you know, I make no apology. I personally make no apologies for asking the government to support our efforts to bush roadways and to clear drains in accordance with the hurricane cycle. And I really don't care whether people want to call it bullet work or what and what and what. So that's nonsense. The truth is that as a country, we have to be able to acknowledge that these are necessary interventions that we need to undertake.
Well, I see that you have started a conversation that publicly, the one that you and I started at the beginning of the year. I said that program has to be looked at, and I'm sure each parliamentarian would agree, because for me, the taxpayers ought to get more than what we're giving them right now. And a program like that, where I think effectively should come through the National Works Agency, them initiating it, but it has to happen, a major one like what we get at the end of the year, at least once per quarter, because the amount of roadways that we have now that are not being able to be touched at the end of the year is also a risk of those who are utilizing those roadways. So we have to find some mechanism. I can't tell you what it is, but just like the JUTC, I think a serious conversation has to be had in how it is that we maintain our verges and our roadways in a more effective way. Sure.
Mr. Hunter, to support the chairman, I have been in a situation where in a rural constituency that is very lush, we have significant rainfall, and my experience this last Christmas was such that it was a serious challenge bushing the constituency, far more than ever before. I would love the NAA to look at the potential of finding something that can work to kill weeds along the verge, that is safe for our waterways, so that after we have done a bushing program in December, we can go through and do a spraying program that holds those spaces for longer before they're overgrown again. And it allows us now to have the adequate funding to be able to bush another segment. But we have to figure out a mechanism to have the overgrown roadways clear for a much longer time. Even if we can't afford quarterly, something is there that holds the spaces looking good and allowing drivers to move through on some of these roads safely. Mr. Hunter, there are places in East Rural St. Andrew where one side of the road actually meets the other side. And when it rains, it is absolutely dangerous. So we have to look at some mechanism this year to allow for spraying as an intervention that allows those verges to remain clear for longer.
And let me make it clear though, Mr. Hunter, this is not work for members of parliament that we're talking about. As I've always said publicly, it is for the agency to effectively initiate this work. Yeah? So this is not for me to give work to constituents, but it is what we owe to those who are taxpayers and those who are using the roads. And that is why it is termed bullet work, because we do it once a year. It is just an effective part of government's road maintenance. And you know, Madam FS, that's why sometimes when we come to standing finance committees and to meetings like this to look at supplementary budgets and look at the budgeting overall, there has to be a mechanism that we don't just become a talk shop. I find that the standing finance committees are a total waste of time. Because if we come there to give ideas of how it is that we think government can effectively service the residents of Jamaica, and at the end of the day there's no change in the budgeting or the planning of government, then it's a total waste of time. I mean, I'm only saying it to you because you are here, but this is just really, I find it as a parliamentarian a waste of time that we spend hours upon hours going through the budgeting book, and at the end of the day, nothing changes at all, right? And that's why I said that even at the committee level, we have to have a serious conversation within the parliament itself on how we do road maintenance, because a question to you, Mr. Hunter, is that we have heard for the last 2 financial years, the initiation of the Lentman system. Can you give us an update if it has actually started and where? Because I have not seen anywhere that was supposed to be pilot project, anything taking place on those.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, just a couple of comments here. The NWA, as you know, is a cost center, meaning we don't generate our own revenue. So we spend the gift of the Parliament. So at any point in time, Chairman, you and your parliamentary colleagues find it necessary and essential and useful to increase the budgetary provision to the NWA. We are happy to receive it and to use those funds to do what we have agreed to do. So that's my first point. My second point is that in respect of what Member Holness has said, I couldn't agree more. The danger posed to the traveling public from overgrown roadways is palpable. It is there. Now, the reticence to spend money to bush the roads, to my mind, has less to do with financial ability and more to do with a reticence on the part of society to acknowledge that this is a useful undertaking. I still believe, based on the anecdotal comments I've heard, we have talked ourselves in this country into a position where we see bushing as something which is, a waste of taxpayers' money. That's nonsense. I mean, bushing of the roadway is as useful as road marking. The spend is relatively small, but the safety impact is extremely high. You drive on a country road at nights without a road marker, and you drive on that same road with road marker, and you will see that the safety component is exponential compared to the spend. So for a $1 spend, you get a $20 safety premium. So I think we have to first and foremost acknowledge as a country that bushing of roadways is essential for safety and saving lives and limb and property, motor car. Once we have accepted that, then I think the reticence about allocating the funds will go away. The matter, Member Holness, of spraying the verges to keep them in a good condition is something that we will look at. Obviously, we want to employ a chemical that is not environmentally deleterious, but we will do that diagnostic to see what can be done. And then finally, in terms of the Lentman program,
yes.
Chairman, we have done a little pilot on the Lentman program along the corridors from Dunrobin all the way out to Hosamarty. There was a provision in the budget for us to accelerate that the implementation stage. We had identified a number of communities across Jamaica that we wanted to move from the pilot into the implementation stage. Again, because of issues relating to funding, we have not been able to be as aggressive on that as we would like. But as I said before, to the extent that Parliament finds it...
No, but Mr. Hunter, before you move any further, in financial year 1920, you were supposed to have a pilot of the same Lentman. It was deferred to financial year 2020-2021, which is this financial year that we are now completing.
Right.
So as far as
evidence of that, if you drive along the Washington Boulevard.
No, that is Christmas work that do that.
Yeah.
That's December bushing that I drive that at least 3-4 times a week to go to my constituency. And I'm telling you, that is why, hold on, Mr. Hunter, that is why I'm asking you the question. Because you stated before, last year in a committee meeting, that was the pilot, that same Don Robin to Osemate. And that's why I started out by saying I've been looking for it. Because my understanding of the Lentman system is that there's periodic verge cleaning, there's periodic patching of the roadway itself. And what I am seeing is not no periodic. I mean, the bushing that took place in that center, in that median, was done in December. Otherwise, I mean, mongoose could have taken people off of the road with what bush was in that median going even down Washington Boulevard. So that's why I'm saying, when you come to me now and say that it is because of budgeting, as far as I was concerned, I didn't see in any supplementary budget that money for the Lentman program was reduced. So that is why I'm saying, was it started? I'm asking the question, was it started, or is it that you keep buckshopping along the way?
Allow me,
yes,
Chairman,
go ahead,
please. If you would allow me to answer your question, I can bring clarity to the matter.
Good.
Can I respond? Do I have the floor? Hello?
Go ahead, we're hearing you. We're hearing you.
Okay. So the Lentman program, as indicated, would comprise a multiplicity of activity. It is not just bushing, Chairman. It involves drain cleaning, it involves crack sealing, it involves patching. So it's a multiplicity of activities. So your question to me ought to be, what of those activities has been undertaken so far on the corridor? And you don't have to take my word for it, but I can take you out on Don Robin into Washington Boulevard and show you the crack sealing that we have undertaken. I would imagine that perhaps the speed at which you traverse the corridor did not allow you the opportunity to see it. So that's why I'm extending an invitation. So one of the techniques that we use whenever there are cracks in the pavement is to do what's called crack sealing. And we have spent in excess of about $3-4 million on that. The truth is that, Chairman, we did have to divert some of the original provisions under the Lentman program towards the flood damage activity. And let me explain that to you, Chairman, and I need for the members to understand this concept very well. The NWA is not provided with funds ahead of time to clear roads when there is a rain event. How it works, let me be clear. Prior to the start of the hurricane season, we have these sets of meetings with contractors and the owners of equipment, and we have them on a kind of framework standby that whenever there is any blockage of roads, we call on them and we ask them to clear the passages. We do not have a budgetary provision in the bank to pay those bills. And so that is the one part of our activity where we undertake work and then we seek to pay for it. Simply because if you look at the historical numbers, the provision in the recurring estimates for clearing roads, it's 54 million. And I put it to you, Chairman, it has been 54 million for the last 6 years or 7 years. And $54 million to clear block roads island-wide in a country, in an island that is in the middle of the hurricane season, just doesn't go very far. So what it is that we oftentimes have to shift some money to that head so as to pay the contractors And all the MPs on this committee are very familiar with having to call us to say, John Brown did this work, and wants to be paid. So Chairman, let us acknowledge that in the absence of a more robust budget, we have to, as they say, turn our hand and make fashion.
Member Holness, you wanted to.
Mr. Hunter, just
yes, ma'am.
To take us back to a recommendation I'd made years ago, I would love to see over time NAA embarking on a program, area by area, constituency by constituency, giving us a sense as to what are the critical spaces that will get attention A, then what falls as B, what falls as C. So we have a better sense, and we're even able to explain to our constituents that based on the budget, these are the roads that are earmarked A roads. These are the roads that definitely will be getting touched by the NAA for either road maintenance, road upgrade, for drains right across the way. Up to now, I am still not able to determine where all the drains are in my constituency. I remember when Gordontown Road broke away, somebody explained to me that a drain was there that blocked 6 years ago that nobody knew about. Neither myself as the MP, council didn't know the drain existed. NAA didn't seem to know the drain existed. So if we can sit down, even if it takes us 5 years and we slowly go through, and we do an assessment and say, these are all the critical drains across Jamaica. These are the critical roadways that are going to get first priority. These are the ones that will get second priority. And it really doesn't matter who the member of parliament is. It doesn't matter what side of the fence they're on. This is what we need to achieve across the country. I remember you said the budget would probably be over $1 trillion, more than the budget for the entire country for a year is what it would take. But at least if we're able, even without dollar figures, to know exactly what are the critical paths that we must travel. Each member of parliament would now be able to say, look, like me, Robertsfield, I see a ball in, but guess what? We are not going to be able to find the funding to do a Robertsfield, a Davids Hill. Cane River is going to be next. It actually helps all of us to be in a better place, to plan 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead of time and be able to stick to that plan.
So, Mrs. Holness, you couldn't have said it better. And indeed, and in fact, I have advanced that thesis, as you know, over the years, that if you, and this is not reinventing the wheel, if you look at other locations, other countries, how it is done, whether it's the UK, whether it is Japan, whether it's Malaysia, United States. I have friends who went to university with me who manage similar portfolio in different countries. It's simple. What you need is certainty of financing. And a number of countries have done it. For example, in the UK, although the financing is provided from the consolidated fund, it is ring-fenced, meaning that the road authority knows with perfect certainty the quantum of money it is going to get over time. In other jurisdictions, they finance road maintenance from, say, the gas tax. So the road authorities know with perfect certainty what is the income into the portfolio. You can then go to a community and say to a community, I cannot do your road this year or next year, but I will tell you with perfect certainty that it will be done in the third year because I have certainty of financing. There is a World Bank study which was undertaken, and I have copies of it, on road maintenance in the Caribbean and Latin America. And the conclusion of that study, and that was long before I even came to the NAA, was that where road maintenance is funded from the consolidated fund, there is too much volatility because 1 year you get X, the next year you get Y, the third year you get Z, and so there's not certainty of financing, and therefore there can't be certainty of planning. So the construct for a civilized road maintenance regime consists of a defined financing mechanism that is saved in law. And I know Member Phillips and I have talked about this, and he has mentioned the road maintenance fund. But if you examine the road maintenance fund legislation, the only portion of the financing that was saved in law was the 1/3 from the motor vehicle licensing activity. All the other financing provisions in the Road Maintenance Act says the minister from time to time, which speaks to a degree of uncertainty. So what you need, the construct that you need is one that has certainty of financing. The second thing that you need is a governance structure that would rationally determine how the money is to be spent. And then you have a monitoring apparatus to see that what was agreed on is how it goes. But Mrs. Holness, my difficulty now is that, and remember the last time I came to Parliament and did a presentation, looking at the budgetary provision for the last 8 years, what it shows is that the initial provision was X, and it was only increased in the face of rain events. And so there's tremendous volatility. I have no idea as I speak now what my next provision is going to be. And it is only when it is voted in Parliament that then I have to run back and then try and do an allocation. So I take your point that for us to do long-term planning, we need long-term assurance of the financing provision.
You and I have been having this conversation for quite a while. And I think, seeing that the RMF was now subsumed in the consolidated fund, I think the conversation for a dedicated fund and some certainty on how it is we're going to, because we see it out there on the roads when we go out there as members of Parliament. I'm sure even FS, when she's driving home, to experience some bad roads. And we as parliamentarians come here year after year and having our constituents asking us when next. And it also brings into focus the whole conversation of where the roads fall. Is it under the municipal council or is it the National Works Agency? We have to look at the ownership and financing of our roadways, and not who owns it and who doesn't own it, but how it is that we allow taxpayers to have something that is worthwhile traveling on.
Chairman, I would like to, very quickly, sorry, please. I would like to make a very quick intervention on that point because I've heard it so many times. And what the argument is that notwithstanding anything, road is road, and therefore the NWA should go and do XYZ. The chairman, the prerogatives of the NWA arise from a statute. It's called the Main Roads Act, which is a gift of Parliament. And based on what I've read, and I know you have lawyers there in your committee, the courts have held that whatever Parliament prescribes by law, that is what Parliament wants. Parliament has said, by virtue of the Main Roads Act, that the NWA's legal prerogative is 5,000 kilometers of main roads. Any time that the Parliament wants the NWA to add 1 more kilometer to that 5,000, it is at the gift of Parliament. So, we have been hauled over the coals in a previous dispensation for spending money on non-NWA roads. The Auditor General has had me for lunch for that. So all I'm saying is this: there's no institutional reticence about road is road, but it is at the gift of Parliament. Because as it now stands, Parliament has said to me, by virtue of a statute, that I must confine myself to 5,000 kilometers of main roads.
And just agreeing with you, and I'm saying to you, Mr. Hunter, that the conversation has to be spoken about. We have to have that conversation about ownership, but also the financing, because giving you the rest of the roadways, the 11,000 kilometers that is under the stewardship of the municipal councils, and not knowing where the financing is coming from is exactly. So my point, it has to be had hand in hand. Ownership and financing. Let me go to Member Clark, or Member Hamilton,
yes,
and
I
then
just want
Member
to
Clark.
add to this, because I've been listening to the points, and they're all valid. And I do agree that we need to do more. But I find that we spend a lot of time discussing how we spend money, but we don't spend a lot of time discussing how we earn. And I think we have to earn in order to spend. So if we have the money to spend, I don't think we'd be in a problem like this. I think NWA would get their allocation that they want, and we'll all be happy. So I think we need to spend more time as a group, meaningfully, be productive, and come up with ways how we can earn and build the economy.
Member Clark, who is online.
Mr. Chairman, I was waiting quite a while now for you to recognize, but so be it. I do agree with what Member Hamilton just spoke about. That is one of our most important issues that we must address as a committee, as a parliament. But I want to go back to the point where Madam Holness would have raised the issue of bushing on a more timely basis, and to use a chemical, some spraying chemical that would alleviate some of the situation as is. But the point I want to bring out, in addition to what she have said, is the fact of the overhanging trees. Too many of our roadways are looking more like a forest. You're driving through a forest, you know, and we need to find a way. We need to put that in the program, because I found out this Christmas that we did not have, or we don't have anything to treat with such matter in the Christmas program. And I'm still at a loggerhead, because I'm one of those persons who firmly believe that part of our problem with the damage to our roadway is really the overhanging trees that causes the water not to dry up from the roadway in quick succession. You know, and I don't know, I would love to hear what Sir Hunter has to say on this matter.
Okay, so Member Clark, very quickly. I agree with your position. The truth about it, a lot of our roadways were never designed. They were not designed or engineered roads. They were pathways that were traveled on, and subsequently they were paved. One of the key components of any well-designed roadway is the drainage component. And a well-designed road is set in such a way that water does not stay on the surface for more than a certain time. That is how the engineers, when they're doing the design, we calculate how long water should stay on the road. Because if it stays on the road longer than that, it's going to destroy the road. So your point is well taken. Whether it is by natural evaporation from sunshine, or it is by virtue of flow, gravity flow into the drains at the side, the water has to get off the surface for the road to be in a good condition. But most of the roads don't have drains. And so to the extent that we can have sunlight, and the overhang is definitely not conducive to a safe corridor. So I agree with you entirely, Member Clark.
All right.
But again, it comes down to provision.
All right. Are you through, Member Clark?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm through for now. I'm listening keenly as to what is taking place.
Okay. Madam FS, I just want to refer to the front page of the Gleaner this morning. Read the Ministry of Education, and it's not completing its accounting so that they can be properly audited. And from time to time, we come to committees like this, where we see, or sometimes we table, where we get reports that agencies have not done their accounting appropriations on a timely manner, in breach of the FAA Act itself. Where does the Ministry of Finance know? What's its position on, especially in this matter, which is a matter that is in the annual report of the Auditor General, and what actions are taken on MDAs that are in breach of the FAA?
All right, sir. So, to the best of my knowledge, where there is a breach, I believe it actually.
Not hearing you clearly.
I believe it needs to be elevated to the Solicitor General, to the Attorney General's department. Let me get some more information on that and respond.
But Madam FS, I mean, this is, I am sure that this would have come across your desk, because by the Auditor General's report, it is saying that the accounts for 7 years, for a 7-year period, you know, even the bank reconciliation has not been done. But every year, that same ministry that she is reporting on gets an increase in its budgetary allocation. And we understand that education is important, but yet still the breach continues. So at what point is it that the Ministry of Finance, that you are the Financial Secretary, steps in to ensure that these MDAs, or the ministry itself, is compliant, because they are in breach of the same act itself that Member Hunter said that we pass here in Parliament? But yet still, as Financial Secretary, these breaches continue. So I just want to know at what point, because to say that you're going to do more investigation on it when it is in breach for 7 years is not enough. It's not enough.
An FS question: is there any responsibility, any action that can be taken as it relates to the financial officers in charge of administering updated and proper accounting records at the various agencies, ministries, and departments if they fail to do so? I suspect you could take the decision to go in, provide additional manpower to get them up to where they should be. But is there any sort of performance management of their capability to do their work, get it done, do so efficiently, and to keep their ministries, agencies, and departments up to date? And that's general, not just the Ministry of Education.
Okay, so again, I would need to do some checks to give you a definitive position. There are plans in terms of the whole performance management, expected improvements coming shortly. Currently, the accounting officer, to the best of my knowledge, can be held accountable in terms of actual sanctions. I can't speak to them right now. I don't know what is there.
The question is, have we ever held any accounting officer accountable? I mean, over the period you're talking for the Ministry of Education, 642 billion would have been allocated to the Ministry of Education over that period. And in doing your own research, it will be good to know how many other MDAs that are in breach of the said FAA Act and how many accounting officers have been held accountable? Because, you know, Madam FS, I am not feeling comfortable that you as Financial Secretary is coming here today to tell me that this is a matter that you have to do some research on. I mean, you are the Financial Secretary. The buck stops with you. And I'm sure over a 7-year period, as long as you have been there, it would have raised a red flag even on your own desk that this is in breach.
Right,
Chair,
so
just to add as well, the RGD is also having a difficulty over there. And you don't hear about what happens when these things are not done. I mean, KPIs have been done for 3 years. So how do you assess whether or not the entity is performing as it should?
And if it is that the Auditor General cannot get the information, then they cannot be audited properly.
Chairman, I would want to add something to that. And I believe regardless of who is government of the day, whichever party, I have sat here for the last 5 years observing very often ministers are targeted for breaches within ministries as if the minister is the one that runs the ministry. The perception of the public is that the minister runs the ministry. It is not so, and it is something for the public to appreciate that the permanent secretary, the accounting, that is the accountable officer at each ministry. And so it is very, very critical that it is understood that the ministry is effectively a business. The permanent secretary is in charge of that business. The accounting department is responsible for all the accounting records, reconciliations, keeping up-to-date accounts in that business. And it must be understood that they have to get their MDAs up to standard, and the Ministry of Finance is responsible to hold them to account. We have to understand, and I know the Ministry of Finance knows this, the FS knows this more than anyone else. If you do not have up-to-date, on-time reconciliations and of your accounts, it therefore opens you to the possibility of having audits that the Auditor General comes here and say you are in breach. This is happening in the ministry. Ministers sometimes have no clue that that is happening in the ministry until you have an audit that unearths a problem that could have been found out if we kept up to date with our accounts. So, FS, when you go back, have the discussions when we're looking at the budget as to what it will cost us as a government to get additional help if that is required, to get all our accounts up to date, separate and apart from who we hold responsible, getting our records up to date, and then maintaining them in a way that they continue to be kept up to date. It makes no sense we come year after year and hear that an account is 7 years outstanding, 10 years outstanding. By the time those accounts are done, they make no sense to anybody. There is no difference that it could make because there's no decisions you can make as it relates to the quality of those accounts. They're like history, and really history, way, way back history. So we must be able to mandate to get every single MDA to a place where your accounts is current, and you have some sort of stipulation that current means your accounts must be within the last 2 years. And then current means our accounts is in the last year. But it cannot be that we continue to come here and accounts are 7 years dated, 10 years dated, they serve no purpose.
Chair, I just want to add to that point because I believe Member Holness is right on point, but I think we have to do performance reviews. If it is that we have accounts that are outstanding for 7, 8, 9 years and we have the same person in that position, it means that we're not being productive and we're not operating as we should because we're not having performance reviews, or they're just being rubber stamped. Because you can't have one person in a position and we're having these issues and that person maintains that position. I think we have to change how we operate as a government and be more serious about how we do our business and run our business, because as was said, it is a business.
Chairman.
Go ahead, member.
I do concur with my colleagues the fact of accountability. And secretary, who is effectively the CEO, has the accounting responsibility. But the fact is that the buck stops with the minister. And the reason why that is so, the PS has no authority over revenue generation to provide. Over the years, we have been told the reasons why many agencies and departments are derelict in submitting reports is one, either staff allocation or absence of it, and the revenue to fund the staff to do. And what is done at the budgetary level is the allocation of funds. It is the government of the day, whichever one it happens to be, that makes those determinations. The financial people, particularly the Ministry of Finance, will make recommendations, but they don't make decisions. They have to get the concurrence of the minister and ministers, ultimately at cabinet level. So let us be clear in our mind in terms of where the responsibility lies, what we ought to be keen on, and that's why we ask them at the committee levels. Because we make recommendations to the full House of Parliament. Committee itself don't have any authority. It examines and it makes recommendations to the full House. The Parliament as the full House, where the political director lies. So when we recognize these deficiencies, and it's either because of resource non-allocation, we must put that to the place where the allocation can be decided upon and to be made available to the agency to do it. But let us be clear on that. We want to make sure that the FS, for example, tell us what is the real problem. Why is it that these are not being done? Right? Is it that you require technical competence that don't exist? Is it that you're not being given the funds that you need to get done what is to be done? Let us know. And let us, as committee members, speak to our colleague in the House who sits in the cabinet as that has final responsibility for raising taxes or don't raise tax to do what government needs to do.
Member Holness, you wanted to?
Member Jackson, the FS indicated that for some of the information requested, she would like to go back and do some double checks. I would ask, if at all possible, and Member Hamilton raised the same concern, I have asked the Auditor General why we are not doing more performance-based audits over and over. We have no clue as to whether or not many of our MDAs are performing optimally, could do better, or they're already at their very best. When we have called in some of the parish councils for discussions, you will find that they have not gotten their full complement of individuals there to be able to maintain their accounts. Do not know if that is across ministries, agencies, and departments. FS, what would be good for us when we next see each other is if we could get an indication of the number of ministries, agencies, and departments that are not up to date in terms of their records. If the issue is a funding issue, if the issue is a skills gap issue. So is it that either we're not paying enough, so we're not attracting the right persons, but how can we help? Is there any recommendation we can make for additional budgetary support for you to be in a position of being able to get the records of MDAs up to date? What does it require? And then we can take it from there.
And just to add to that coming from the FS, just those MDAs that are in breach that have not is important. And again, I'm going to ask, has any accounting officer ever been held accountable for these breaches? Yeah.
Chairman,
yeah.
but just one last point, if with your permission.
Sure.
I concur with the point raised by Member Holness just now. But I think it was you who made the point earlier, Chairman, that every ministries and agencies come to the Ministry of Finance or come to the government through the Ministry of Finance. Allocation of, well, extended allocation or new allocation for each budget year. Every taxpayer who has to do business, to import and so forth, has to get a TCC.
Yes.
The purpose of that TCC is to make sure that they are fully compliant with all their taxes. If there are any compliance requirement by agencies when they come to the ministries for money, make sure that you are behind, you're up to date, not behind, and your obligations, because the Ministry of Finance has oversight responsibility for all public agencies as it relates to their financial responsibilities. So my question to the FS, does the ministry has in place any kind of checklist, sort of equivalent to a TCC at the end or the beginning of each financial year that inform your allocation decision?
That's for UFS.
All right, so the Ministry of Finance does get information from the MDAs. We have a requirement for monthly statements, which provide actual data on a monthly basis. Those do come to the Ministry of Finance.
And then what happens if they're not compliant?
We have been getting the statements. We have been getting those statements.
No, I'm saying if that MDA is not compliant, then what happens?
All right, so if I recall correctly, we put what happens now in place some time ago, some years ago, when there seemed to have been some fall off, and the statements have now been coming on a regular basis.
Well, because
right, those statements are used to justify the monthly release of funds.
No, but then if what we're looking at from the Ministry of Education coming out of the Auditor General's report,
those are
but even the bank recon is not even up to date. So how can a statement come when a bank recon, maybe how they expend it, but is it that?
All right, so sir,
what is it that you're looking for in that statement then?
Okay, Chair, the statements that the Auditor General would be speaking about, I believe, would be the annual statements.
Yeah.
And other things in terms of the funds we are releasing, how we operate now. For the most part, the payments are made directly by the auditor, by the Accountant General. Mm-hmm. The ministries upload to the Accountant General system based on the warrants that are issued against the budget. They upload, and the Accountant General actually effects the payments directly to whoever they pay. So the information in terms of payments will come out of the Accountant General.
But the point I'm making is that if you're a publicly listed company, you would have been delisted already, because you would have been delisted already. And the point I'm making, that despite who is doing the disbursement, Madam FS, if there is a breach of the FAA Act that a ministry, department, or agency over a period of 7 years is even absent of a bank reconciliation, then that opens them up to fraud. It opens them up to all different, things that can happen. And they themselves have been in breach, but yet still over that period has received over $600 billion. And I'm just saying that that is not a responsible way of allowing any department or agency or ministry to operate without any accountability. That's just the greater point that we're trying to make. And I would expect that from your desk, from the ministry that you're from, that it would have raised a red flag. Be it that the Accountant General is the one doing the disbursement, but she can't do the disbursement unless you send the money to her, to that department.
Chairman, just to add and correct my ignorance here, FS, because I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out if the Financial Secretary is at liberty, if you have concerns about the timeliness and efficiency of report coming from various MDAs, that you can actually send out the Auditor General to do an assessment of where they are, what is going on. You're at liberty to do so?
The Minister can direct the Auditor General. The Minister, not the Financial Secretary.
Because you have on the mask, we can hardly hear you. So
sorry, the Minister of Finance would need to.
But the Minister of Finance wouldn't be aware unless there is some mechanism that reports to the Minister that these are the MDAs that we have concerns about. That's what I'm trying to get to. If there is a structured way that we maintain a listing of derelict MDAs.
All right, so from how we currently operate, derelict for us would be in relation to the things that we monitor on a regular basis, which would be like monthly statements, which would be how they are spending against the budget, etc. The auditing for the full year, for the fiscal year, end of year, is really the Auditor General. It is something we can look at with what has now arisen. We can look at how the place is structured and what may need to be done to improve it. But we are, in fact, where we see something, we call the ministries. We will call the ministries and attempt to get it resolved.
All right. Members that are online, unfortunately, we can't see your hands when it is raised. I understand that Member Morrison and Member Clark wants to make an intervention. Whichever you are online now, please go ahead.
Yes, Chairman. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I wanted to agree with my colleagues earlier in the sense that the problem that we face every day, being a member of Parliament for more than 5 years now, is the fact that the persons who are to be held accountable, we are not doing that. And so they get away with things years after years after year after year. And it makes the work of us in Parliament a little bit more difficult than what it ought to be. The time that we start to hold persons in the different agencies and ministries accountable for what they need to do, even the fact, Madam Holness raised the issue of understaffing, even the fact of person to report to the different committees or to wherever to say, we do not have the staff to do the reconciliation, to do the things that needs to be done. We are unable to get that information, and so we don't know what is what. And then everything is left up to members of Parliament or ministers. And so we have to look at that. It's full time that we start to say to Tom Jones, you are going to be held responsible because you have the position, and so you have to wear the cap. Simple.
Thank you. Member Morrison, are you still wanting to say something? No. Madam FS, your tax intake. I don't remember if you had given us a breakdown. What is your expected receipt for this financial year, where we are now, and the different categories, if you could, please?
Sure. So, under the second supplementary estimates, we are forecasting. We are forecasting an $11.2 billion increase in our overall revenue and grant inflows. This is expected to come from tax revenues, $4 billion, non-tax revenues, $4.5 billion, Bauxite levy, 2 billion, and from grants, 619 million in terms of the increases. The bauxite levy is already in. The non-tax revenues primarily from financial distributions from a number of the entities, and the tax revenues expected from the international trade side of our taxes. So that is some of what is expected to finance the second supplementary estimates.
Yes, but I was just, the second supplementary, I understand that because that's in your report. But what do you expect for the financial year that I was trying?
The overall amount?
Overall amount,
sure.
Yes.
It is $717.4 billion in total is what we expect in revenues. That's comprised of 606 from tax revenues, 97 billion from non-tax revenues.
90 how much?
97 billion. 2.1 from bauxite levy, 1.1 from capital revenues, and 10.8 billion from grants.
How much from grants? Go again.
10.8.
10.8.
It's actually, there is a table on the back of your
it is.
presentation.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Members?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Chairman, just to back up on to the FS, this supplementary budget, as we have been told, is primarily or in great part to deal with the increases to public sector workers based on the 4% settlement within the financial year. There have been some reports about outstanding payments, particularly for persons in the health sector, medical doctors and others, in light of the COVID situation. My question to the FS, and I know that the PS in health is online too, or other representatives. Where are we with outstanding contracted payments for health sector workers and others, as special benefits, etc., incentives in the COVID situation? Could you just get an overview of where we are now that we're seeking to make provision for financial settlements?
Hi, good. Apologies. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. Good morning, colleagues from our ministries, departments, and agencies. Chairman, could you repeat the question, just by way of clarity?
I was the one, yes. Good morning, Minister of Finance. I was asking...
That's Ministry of Health.
Should I go ahead, Chair?
No, I said that was Ministry of Health. That's the PS, Ministry of Health, that is...
Yes.
That's yours.
But the question I directed to the FS was regarding the Ministry of Finance. So I was saying either one could... And I think the PS was taking it up.
Well, repeat the question is what they want.
Sure.
Would like.
My question through the FS to the PS in L was to find whether or not there are any outstanding payments or claims for payments with health sector workers. There have been recent reports, particularly last one I can recall was the medical doctors who were reporting complaints about not being correctly remunerated for extended hours during the period. Are we with outstanding payments to the sector workers?
Thank you very much for that question, member. There are different categories of payments that are made, especially for December period. There was the regular salaries, there was the payments for the 4% increase that were calculated, and in the Ministry of Health and Wellness, we had to apply that 4% increase calculation to sessions and honoraria that was paid to staff from April 1 when it became effective. And so our calculations were a little bit more complex than usual. And then we had the payments for the COVID vaccination program, where staff were paid for their work on weekends and on holidays relating to the vaccination program. For the payments in 1 and 2, those payments were made and are up to date. So we are in good standing with those payments. Now, for the COVID vaccination payments, those payments are being paid through the regional health authorities at this time. And in some instances, there have been issues with the payment, the receiving banks for payments. And so some persons have not been paid since the records that we have received indicate that in some cases, some persons have not been paid from as far back as October of this year for the vaccination program. But that number at this point in time is some 250 individuals across the island, across parishes and across regions. And the commitment from the regional health authorities is for us to resolve those payments as by the end of January this year.
Pierce, my fundamental question is really whether or not the ministry is adequately funded to meet these payments, which are either been incurred already or is projected to be incurred between now and the end of the financial year. Because our supplementary budgeting arrangements is to supplement the budget passed initially for the financial year that we're in. And I would want sometime next month or early March, we are hearing complaints that payments for these workers can't be made because they have to wait until the next financial year. And I say that against the background, Chairman, that the health sector workers, among others, like in the police force and so on, are the ones which are most stressed and stretched in this COVID situation. And the worst thing we can do is to demoralize them by us as a state, as a government, all of us in government, fail to pay to them that which is outstanding at this time when we're asking them to do more than they normally would do.
All right, the FS will respond.
Thank you. Member, the Minister of Finance and the Public Service has ensured that everything that has been requested in terms of wages and salaries for the Ministry of Health and for all the other entities has in fact been provided. The warrants have been done. The funds have been released. The Accountant General has released everything that has been requested. For the Ministry of Health, in terms of areas that need to be looked at, the regional health authorities is somewhere that some focus needs to be put on.
All right. Are there any other questions? I remember has just finally FS, because also in the Auditor General's report, she speaks about a breakdown of contracts that is not compliant to the Ministry of Finance's guidelines. When the Auditor General report is tabled and issues like that arise, is it something that the Ministry of Finance deals with? Because in her report it speaks about incurring of additional costs. Somebody has their mic open. Can you mute for me, please? Is it something that the Ministry of Finance, seeing that there is not an alignment of the employment rules to deal with that with contracts? Is it something that the ministry deals with immediately?
It's something that we have become aware of. However, there are really no sanctions in place, and we are moving now to review.
How do you, because a contract, be it that it is not within the government guidelines, is a legal document. How is it now that the ministry then bring these contracts in line? Because I'm sure that the one mentioned in the Auditor General's report is not the only one that might be out there. And how is it that an examination of these contracts, seeing that it is highlighted by the Auditor General in this instance?
All right, we have in recent times been issuing new directives, so to speak, in terms of need for compliance, in terms of people needing to address any breaches, but there are no sanctions on the books, so we are limited in terms of what we can do from the Ministry of Finance, that is.
Well, if it is that an MDA, again, goes into a contract with an individual or any entity, or especially in this instance, an employment contract that is not in line with government employment guidelines, then, and to say that there are no sanctions for that is a troubling statement, Madam FS. I mean, you know, in the Auditor General's report itself says that this can be an additional cost to the government and taxpayers of Jamaica. So, you know, and I understand the matter that it is a legal document, but to have it just remain as is without any, and I'm not saying sanction, but with ensuring that it is corrected would be a dereliction of duty to the people and taxpayers of the country.
If we can definitively identify an overpayment, then the funds will be recovered.
As if there's an overpayment?
Yes.
But there is still a contract that is not in line with government's guidelines.
With the guidelines. The contract may not be in line with the guidelines. Dependent on the situation, will determine whether or not we can recover.
But then, if there is still time in that contract, will that said contract be re-looked at to ensure that it is brought within government guidelines?
Right. So an option is to see if we can do that. Another option is to terminate. We would have to look at the situation. As you said, it could be a legally binding contract, even though it doesn't meet the guideline. So you would have to look at each situation at this point. But
case-by-case
we are
basis,
making...
It has to be addressed on a case-by-case basis.
Sorry?
That would have to be addressed on a case-by-case basis.
No,
as you said, it's a legal document. So
understood,
it's difficult for any kind of intervention to take place whole scale.
No, but to say that there are no sanctions when it is be it a board or, you know, and I'm sure that each contract has to be looked at its merits by the Ministry of Finance, is it? Or how is it that these contracts are approved?
Right. So the requirement is that the contract should be submitted to the Ministry of Finance, but again, that has not always been the case. We are in the process of putting things in place, other things in place, to strengthen the situation.
That's really disappointing to know that it is not happening, that it is not always the case that the Ministry of Finance gets these documentations to be vetted, and then to say that there's nobody being held accountable is even worse. All right, members, are there any other member online that wants to make an intervention? If not,
Yes, Chairman. Yes, Chairman.
Go ahead.
Local government. I think the solid waste management authority is online. The last time the NSAA before the PAAC did on a major backlog of garbage collection throughout the country. We are now doing the supplementary, and I didn't get a chance to look particularly at that item, but if the NSAA could indicate to us where they are in terms of funding to mitigate the level of under collection of the country. I know for my own self, I see a major pileup of garbage in Portmore. Especially in the public skip, where the skips are.
All right, and let me just say, whenever anyone is making an intervention, please turn on your cameras as the meeting is being televised. All right. Is the National Solid Waste online?
Yes, Chairman.
Could you answer the question by the member, please?
Other than general concern, Chairman, leading up to the Christmas season, we had some help to engage additional tipper trucks, and we were able to stay on top of the garbage during Christmas because of the additional trucks that we got, that we are the additional tipper trucks. But you know that tippers are not really efficient to move garbage, so it's really pretty much like throwing away money, because when you load one tipper, it's still to the brim. It's about a quarter of the load that a compactor will bring. The answer to the trucking problem and the garbage problem, Chairman, frankly, is that we need the 100 trucks that were promised us a couple of years ago before the COVID pandemic. We have to have trucks to move garbage, and it's no point having a little shock treatment where you bring in some extra tipper trucks here and there, because they can't move the garbage based on the volume that is generated daily, especially with the unplanned settlements and those traditionally problematic areas. So there is a problem, and we know what to do to resolve the problem, but we have to be equipped to do that.
But yeah, I hear you, Mr. Gordon. I hear you. But now basically is what you said the last time you were at the PAAC. But I know you mentioned again about the Christmas period. The tipper trucks probably are best suited to like the heavy debris and so forth. But the domestic garbage drive through so many communities in Portmore, not just in my constituency, and see the huge pileup garbage at these community dump sites. It is unsightly and unhealthy. And just about 2 days ago, I went on it and was bewildered by the pileup that prevailed. Is there anything in terms of funding to allow you to alleviate those, especially in urban centers that have a high population level?
Right. So Chair, it is known that the budget that we are given each year, that is hopefully inadequate, is not a credible budget that we are following. We get whatever is allowed under the ceiling that goes across government. And so every year we submit a budget that will probably end up with a half of what we require to do a good job. So we are always behind the 8 ball. The payment to the supplementary truckers, as always, once you get into the first 5-6 months of the financial year, where the property tax is at its best, you start declining. And once you reach this time of year, you're always in a problem where you're behind with your payments, and that creates all sorts of problems. So it is not really rocket science. It's inadequate budget and inefficient equipment. And once we juggle a lot and try our best to, keep, especially the main roads where they have some problematic spots. You have one in Britain, which, not go ahead, sorry, that continues to give us a problem. We clean it within a few hours, it's back to where it was. But it is all over Jamaica. I don't want to see Lord Nagozed like there's a problem unique to Nagozed. But it's all over Jamaica, Chairman and Member. It is a real problem. The trouble is we cannot stay on top of the garbage without reliable units and ability to pay for the operation. The operation is very, very expensive. And even in the supplementary budget, what I'm hearing that is allocated for us in the supplementary will only be paid salaries up to a point there, March or thereabout. So we will be having more trouble with operations, quite frankly.
But let me...
Okay, sir. I hear you. Chairman, I think this is a point that we have to make in our report, in our submission.
Yeah. But let me ask, Mr. What is your... What would be comfortable for the... for National Solid Waste to deal with the issue of garbage collection? Because in this supplementary budget, I see an additional 310 million being given to the agency for public cleansing and activities. What would be for the year? What is needed? What actually is needed to be able to operate efficiently and effectively?
All right, so Chairman, we submitted our recent submission was $17 billion. That includes the purchase of 100 new garbage trucks, which takes out about 3.1 billion out of that. You also have the attending costs that will be required to keep those trucks running, the extra drivers, the extra sidemen, the fuel, etc., etc. However, if we were given that money, it wouldn't be an annual sum because you wouldn't buy the trucks every year. So it would go down in 23-24 budget cycle by the 3 billion plus. So if you're asking for a figure that would be annual, it would be around about 12-13 billion. But with the price of the new trucks, it pushes it up a little bit.
So you 13 billion to operate efficiently and effectively. And you are getting, including what is in the supplementary budget, $1.7 billion.
No, Chairman. We would have our total spend last year would have been somewhere in the region of $6 billion overall. When we speak here, we speak about what comes for salaries and everything, because we have to pay the first call and any money you have is salaries. And we have a huge wage bill each fortnight. Chairman, that is somewhere in the region of 70 billion between the sweepers and the sanitation workers and the garage and landfill staff and all that. So a high percentage of the funds allocated to us get eaten up in wages.
So you're basically operating at half of what you actually need budget-wise.
But yes, that's true, Chairman, but the garbage, while we operate at 50%, the garbage coming out at 100%.
Okay. Go ahead.
In addition to what Mr. Gordon is saying, I believe as a parliament, we need to lobby for the requisite legislation to come before us that will treat with or sanction our disposal activities. I mean, I can speak, for example, in my constituency where persons just litter the streets. Mr. Gordon mentioned the truck coming to pick up the garbage now, and by another hour, 2 hours, it's back to where it was. Yeah. But we're not doing anything about that aspect of it. And so it is impossible for the NSWMA to be collecting garbage on such a frequent basis in one area and, neglecting other areas. But we as a people, we need to have more civic pride. We need to dispose of our garbage properly. And I think legislation will help, but I also think we need to... The sanction is one aspect of it, and having the legislation there, but if we do nothing to police...
I've learned in this parliament that we pass laws, but there are no enforcements.
And that's the issue.
I was just helping you. We need to enforce these laws. Because there are laws on the books dealing with...
We have some.
Good.
We have some.
Yes.
But we also need to go a little further as well. Containerization, for example, that sort of thing. And then, you know, we can speak about the enforcement aspects of it.
All right. Thank you.
Chair.
Sure. Go ahead.
If I may, just to indicate or remind that the NSWMA is actually funded from the parochial fund and not really the central government. So we are just providing a subvention for them.
Yes.
Okay.
Chairman, as an excellent chairman, you'll allow me please, because that's a very good point to jump in and make this comment. We have seen over the years where the property taxes, even if we were to get every cent from the property taxes, it would be inadequate to properly fund solid waste management in Jamaica.
Yeah. It's a similar thing that we are speaking about to do with road maintenance also, that these services being provided have to have a predictable revenue stream for them to be efficient and effective. And what we have now is really an unpredictable revenue stream for both. Hence why the Ministry of Finance has to now be giving a grant towards being able, for you to be able to complete the financial year. So it is something, these are issues that each time we raise it, it comes back to us as parliamentarians, but I think that it's an issue that has to have a serious conversation about. Otherwise, the services will continue to depreciate as we have been seeing over the period.
Chairman, I'm going to go back to a point that was made by Member Hamilton. When we come to these sessions and we have these discussions, sometimes I feel it is for naught. It takes us back to our very macro problem. We have more debts than we can tax. And so we are in a vicious cycle of forever discussing not having adequate money or budget to fund government. We do not have enough because we can only raise so much revenue and no more, even from property taxes. People are at some point where they feel, look, we are taxed enough. And so a lot of our discussions end up needing to be surrounding the efficiency of spending what we have to spend.
And cutting waste.
And cutting waste, because there is a difficulty in arguing how we are going to collect more. Literally, a substantial portion of the revenues earned by the government for many, many years have gone to paying back debt. And so it means that we have to be super efficient with the little that we have left in the budget to spend for programs locally, for school, for health, when I say school, for education, for health, for garbage collection, the works. Otherwise, we keep going over the same discussion.
Chairman?
Yes.
All the countries that are doing well with solid waste management and have clean environment, they didn't get there overnight. They get there by galvanizing the entire society around a robust, sustained public education program. They have the fine structure. I mean, the fines that we have in Jamaica are a joke. They're litter and win, because you can laugh and pay the ticket. You know, we need a legal framework that has teeth, that scare the daylight out of people. And we also need to have a trained enforcement team properly equipped, backed by technology. We need to be synchronizing the camera system in our public space, whether through Jamaica or whatever other outfit that we have. Everything will come back to personal responsibility, and public education will help that. But we don't get funds for public education, even though the Act asks us to go out and educate people about good solid waste management habits. We have a plenty of enforcement officers that are paid near minimum wage. They are not even on the establishment. They are all unattached workers. That's what we have called enforcement unit. You know, we have sidemen, those sanitation workers that are out there in rain and sun, and they are unattached. None of them is on the establishment. They work. By the time they reach 40 and they have earner, and they go home with nothing. So we have to be serious. We have to get to a point where we, decide we're on the priority list, and I know there's a lot of competing priorities, but we're on the priority list is solid waste management. We have to ask those questions.
Chairman, Mr. Gordon raised some of the same thought process I had in terms of use of technology to assist with improved policing. But I just want to remind Jamaicans, almost everything we say that we need to police more and we need to have persons who go out there and hold Jamaicans accountable. There is no way at all to ever police our state sufficient in respect of crime, in respect of garbage collection, in respect of how we treat our spaces. If Jamaicans do not go back to the days when we used to, and we need to continue to take personal pride in our spaces, personal pride in how we conduct ourselves, personal pride in appreciating that what makes us uniquely Jamaican is something that we should hold up and keep in high esteem and regard. Nobody is going to be able to police all of us into better behavior. Nobody at all. When garbage is collected at the markets, you see business persons putting their garbage on carts and sending their garbage down to the market. So if we do not have the technology, Jamaica Eye, some sort of satellite that is permanently placed on every single one of us to police us, we literally need to take and appreciate that if we live in garbage, if we live in an environment that is decaying, it reduces the quality of life for each and every one of us as Jamaicans. And we will never be able to collect enough taxes to police ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Our members is 12:41. If there are no other questions, I would like to thank the team from the Ministry of Finance and the representatives from the other agencies who joined us on Zoom, and the members who found themselves here in the Parliament and those who had joined on Zoom. Thank you very much. I just remind members that this report will come to the House tomorrow. So thank you, Madam FS. Thank you, Mrs. Jarrett, for making it today. Members, item 6, any other business? Let me just, as I did not mention at the beginning, there was an apology for member Mike Henry and Lisa Hanna. We didn't do apologies at the beginning. So I just apologize for those two. On item 7, just a reminder that the date of the next meeting is next week, Wednesday, January 19th, where we'll be completing the report from the Ministry of Education and Heart Trust NTA. All right. I move for the adjournment of this meeting.
So move.
Thank you, members.